Good morning. How are you all? Good to see you all too. Yeah. So today's a special day, and the board has guided this notion that we could come together and be more interactive. We did that in the time I was here last time, but today, more specifically, we really want to sort of harvest the ideas, the feelings that you have about this community, give us some feedback, give each other feedback on what this community means to you. Every spiritual community across the land is facing the evolution of these kind of gatherings. And many communities are looking for ways to remain relevant and viable and thriving. And so we're no different. This is a community that's been around. Tell me how long. When did this all begin? Those of you who have been around in the early days. Was it in the 70s? Hi, Charlotte. Hi. Early 70s. So what is that? 50 some years probably that this has been going on. And over the course of those 50 years, obviously there has been the ups and downs, and there's been, you know, more people and different leaders that have come in, and there's been different emphases on how the community can serve the people that are here. And as the makeup of this community changes, then it's important for the community that is here now to give feedback onto what this community, how this community best serves you, and also to have an open door philosophy. How can we continue to be relevant to the greater community beyond these walls? And how can we continue to serve those who would have the experience that many of us have had coming into a Unity community, where we feel like we've come home, and we've come home to, you know, a sense of belonging. We feel where we feel loved and accepted, and a place where we can begin to grow spiritually. So that's what our town hall meeting will be about. I'm just giving you some appetizers so you can begin to salivate on those ideas. And when we get to that, you'll have some more to contribute, I'm sure. But I wanted to start this morning with just sharing my own journey coming into Unity, and I know you all have yours, and it's kind of fun to go down that memory lane. For me, it's been many decades ago, unfortunately. That means I'm older anyway, but it's fine, it's fine. When I think back on this story though, I can still see the day that my wife dragged me into a Unity church. And it literally was dragging, because I had given up on religion. I don't know if any of you can relate to this, but going through my early years, you know, when I had to go to Sunday school, that was okay. But then when I got to be a teenager and I could sort of think for myself, I didn't get it. I just thought, this is stupid. And, you know, of course, when you're a teen, sometimes everything is stupid, but I think I had good reason to have that judgment, because I couldn't see, I didn't have any connection to the notion of a God up there in the sky somewhere that was, you know, supposedly calling all the shots, judging, and that this son, Jesus, you know, had died for my sins. I couldn't get all that. And I know a lot of people got into it, and, you know, that was their thing. But for me, it was, you know, no, I don't want anything to do with church. So that was true for me all the way through my 20s and into my early 30s. And I was following my own religion. My own religion was the one that I had grown up with also. The other religion that wasn't really a religion, but it was the guidelines for living that my parents had given me, which is get a good education, get a good job, make money, and don't be poor, because they had gone through the Depression and those periods. So I played that one out, and found myself in my early 30s, had a good job, married to a beautiful woman, Denise, some of you met her, and standing on the deck of a home that was overlooking the Pacific Ocean in Cayucas, California, with a brand new baby, little boy, beautiful little boy. and the sun was setting, and it was this glorious vista. And I thought, I did it. I made it. I've arrived. Like this kind of, how I had progressively worked this plan, and I had achieved what was supposed to make me happy. And so I checked in, and the feeling was, there's got to be something else. It was still an emptiness, a sadness, a disappointment. I thought, I've been ripped off. This I was sold a bill of goods, and it just has not redeemed the way it was supposed to redeem. And I was so despondent and angry, and I called up my parents, No, I didn't actually call them up, but I wanted to call them up and say, you promised this was going to be peace and happiness and fulfillment. And it isn't. And so thus began for me, maybe for you too, a search. And for a while it just felt like, well, maybe there's some other version of an external reality, getting my ducks in a row in a different configurations, certain, maybe it's the house across the street with even a better view. I don't know, maybe it's a better car. I love my wife, so I'm not going to trade her in, but it was just this, I didn't have another perspective of how to achieve happiness because I was just following this notion of life out there. That my happiness was equated with circumstances, situations, people, relationships, and had nothing to do with a deeper realization. So I was ripe for a spiritual experience, wasn't I? Well, my wife found a Unity church in San Luis Obispo, and she started going, and she said, I'm going to go. And I said, well, you have a good time, but I will not be going into the church. And she went like 3 weeks in a row, and she kept coming home sort of glowing, like, what are they doing there? I mean, are they passing out the Kool-Aid, and what are you smoking in the back room, And she said, no, she said, this message, it's so life affirming. It's so positive. I feel so at home there. My heart feels, and what I've been looking for. And she grew up very strict Southern Baptist, and her feeling coming out of church was not so wonderful necessarily. She felt, a little bit unworthy, what shall we say. So, but she said, I just feel so good, and I feel that there's so much love in this place. She says, you've got to come. And I said no for as long as I could, and finally, she dragged me in, literally. And I said, okay, I'll go, begrudgingly, and I showed up. And so I'm walking up to this, the entrance, and there's this woman standing out front. She's a greeter. And so I'm very much rational minded. I'm very intellectual, and I'm in my head about religion. So I'm not letting down any guard. So I reach out my hand to shake her hand, and she just grabs me. And she was this large woman, and she just enfolded me like my grandmother did, and she just rocked me and said, welcome to Unity. And I was like, and I just about staggered. I didn't understand it, but I got around her. I found a seat in the back, Denise, I said, let's sit back here in case I need to go. And so up comes music, which was quite good. And then the minister comes up, and I thought, well, that can't be the minister. She goes, there's the minister. I said, no, this guy who's about 30 years old, 35 maybe, long blonde hair and a ponytail. And he's just dynamic, and he's funny, and he's everything. I think he's the warm-up act or something. He was the minister. And once he got through all of his shtick, he settled into a message about the prodigal son. Now you might imagine who he was really talking to. If you have people say, that message was just for you or just for me. Well, it was, because he described this journey. The prodigal son was me trying to live this life, taking what I could from life, getting all the, all the baubles and the material things that I could in my life in order to achieve and have success, because that was going to be the success, that was going to be the fulfillment I sought. And like the prodigal son, I found myself hungry and thirsty and yearning and frustrated. And, and then he tells, he says, and the key is when the son turned around. And he realized that what he was looking for was at home all along. And he said, and home is your heart. Home is where God lives in you. That's that's where any yearning that you have can't be satisfied outside of yourself. It has to be found here. And I found myself crying. And it was tears of release and relief, and also a recognition. Truth, when you hear truth, it's never a new idea. It's a recognition of something that you've known all along and you've just forgotten. And that's what makes it so convincing. Nobody can convince you of it intellectually or logically or rationally, but when you recognize it, when people would ask me as a minister, they'd say, well, how do you know that God is real, or truth is truth, or anything? I'd say, have you ever been in love? And they'd say, yeah. I'd say, prove it. How do you know? This is what was the turning point in my life, because I had run out this notion, like so many of us, that life is out there, and that my happiness and my peace and my fulfillment can only be found by the right circumstances, the right person, the right relationship, that life has to show up a certain way for me to be okay, and that the journey of life was to constantly be re-landscaping my life, until I get it just right, and then I'd be happy. And so I would go back to this crazy minister week after week, month after month, and within a year, I was volunteering. I couldn't stay away from the place. It was like I wanted to be in the field of this energy of positivity, of love, of joy. The people were so happy. Why are you so happy? I wanted to know circumstantially why they were so happy. Well, I'm out of a job right now, but man, God is good. What? It didn't rock with the mind. But after a while, I began to realize that people had opened their heart. They had opened their heart to a deeper truth, and the deeper truth now went before them to give them the experience of love and peace and fulfillment, regardless of what was going on in their life. I thought, man, I want more of this. And so I just continued to be a part of this community. And I remember one day someone tapped me and said, hey, would you like to be on our board of trustees? You volunteer a lot around here. And I said, no, I don't think so. But then Richard Levy, who was the minister, called me up personally. And he said, your name keeps popping up, so we wanted to check with you. And he said, all you got to do is give a little talk, in front of the membership. And I went, oh, okay, yeah, sure. So I'll think about it. But I talked to Denise, and she said, this is your calling. God is knocking on your heart right now, telling you got to do this. And I said, really? Is that how it works? I was very unfamiliar with that sort of, how life shows up, and you realize that, if it's kind of like the Harry Potter. You remember when, he gets this message he's supposed to go to Hogwarts, and he doesn't listen right away. And then an owl flies in the window and leaves him a note. And then he ignores that. And then 100 owls come in the window. And then another one, Hagrid breaks down the door and takes him. That's when you're new to this stuff, you need a lot of strong messaging until you finally yield and realize this is for you. This This is for your higher good, and it may not be a problem for your fear. It may not make you feel good. It's not easy peasy. Like for me, speaking publicly was the most scary thing for me to do at that point. I avoided all public speaking situations in my life. But I was going to have to get up in front of, probably 100 people in a membership meeting and tell them why I wanted to be on the board. So I thought, well, how much time have I got? He said, well, you got about 6 weeks. I go, perfect. There's a Toastmasters 6-week class coming up. So I jumped into Toastmasters and did my little icebreaker speech and sat down after 2 minutes, and nobody, I didn't die. And I, little by little, began to do that. So the day came when I had to give this talk, and I had stayed up all night because I couldn't sleep, for one. The other was I had to have the perfect words to say. Did you know this one? Because, I want to sound good. I want to be liked. And all my insecurities were up. And so I stayed up and I wrote this really beautiful speech that I was going to give, like 5 minutes or something. So I get up there and I have my notes, and I stand up and I look out at the group. I look at my notes. Have you ever had this experience? You look at it and you go, what the heck is this? I couldn't even focus. So I just threw it down, and I went into my heart. Probably gets that. And I said, what does this community mean to me? And how my life has been saved. Honestly, I was heading down a spiral where I probably would have ended up drugs, something, because I didn't have another plan. And I was so ticked off by everything that I had done to bring peace and happiness in my life, and it hadn't worked. And when I found that I could feel good by just bringing my attention inward and getting in touch with an energy, a knowing, a sense of being that was already fulfilled. And sure, I still had my struggles and I had problems in life, but I had a sanctuary, not only the one that was the one that I went to on Sunday, but the sanctuary that I found inside my own being. And everyone in this community kept pointing me to that. Not just even with their words, but sometimes just by looking at you, we look at each other and we see the good, the great, the divine, We don't judge, we accept people just as they are. And that is a powerful platform to begin healing, and a further platform for growth and transformation and development, and moving out of our old stories of being victims or feeling that life is against us. So I thought that would be appropriate for me to share that with you today. And then just briefly, as a minister, which has covered 25 years of my life, I have so many stories and I don't have nearly enough time to tell you, but I'll share a couple of them with you. I'll start with the first class I taught. And I'm a brand new minister, and I've got to come out of seminary, but 2 years of seminary, I know all this stuff, right? And so I'm teaching my first class, and it was Unity Basics or something like that. And so I'm doing, well, one of the first principles is that God is good, One presence, one power is good all the time. This hand shoots up. Woman in the front row, and she begins to tell me a story of profound abuse in her life. She says, how is it possible that this God that you're talking about is good all the time when I've had to endure what I've endured? She says, how do I work with that? I gulped, I swallowed hard. I didn't have any experience as a counselor, a little bit in school. So I said, let's just take a moment, And we took a moment, and when I opened my eyes, I was hoping she would be gone. Sorry. A woman that was sitting behind her put her hand on her shoulder, and she said, I've been through this, and I will work with you. That was one of my first memories of how ministry is not just about somebody standing up and giving a message of truth. It's about a community that takes this truth that has awakened in them and doesn't just keep it for their own well-being and their own good, but uses it to extend to other people. To, if I can't believe, then someone else can believe for me until my experience of the truth arises on its own. I saw that, and I have seen that over the years, time and time again. When I felt inadequate as a minister sometimes because I couldn't get to everyone or I couldn't have the answers that they needed, inevitably when I would pray for the greater good. And that greater good oftentimes showed up with someone from the community, showing up for someone else, being the presence of good and the presence of God in a community that has so many people that are willing to open their heart and go outside of their comfort zone. Because it's a calling. You and I all have a calling, not just to realize this divine presence and know it as our own reality, but to express it, to share it, to serve from that knowing. That's what makes spiritual communities. For me, it was time and time again of this incredible feeling of gratitude and awe and humility as a minister. Because I felt like I had a gift, I could do something, I could speak, I did do some counseling, but the community really became the resource that was the biggest positive influence for the people that attended. It was the shared reality. It was people opening their hearts. It was people trusting. It was people being selfless and offering what they could to another person. Very much like 12-step groups operate. Is you actually grow by sharing your hope and your experience with another person. That happens in unity communities readily. And I'll just give you one more because I want to make sure we don't go too long because we have to eat at some point, right? We got to feed this thing. Yeah, I could probably go without a meal or two, but anyway, if my appetite for God was as great as my desire for food, I would be one happy Buddha. Anyway, so this last story was my last day as a Unity minister before I retired. This was in Santa Barbara, 2019, March of 2019 was my last Sunday. I'd given my notice, and I kind of went over like a 45-minute talk, but I wanted to cover everything I'd missed in the last 6.5 years. So, anyway, so it was long, and then there was this huge line of people wanting to say goodbye, which is great. And a lot of connections, a lot of gratitude. And there was this woman, I could see her way at the back of the line. I goes, and I had recognized who she was. Sort of, I knew that she was a young mother. And I thought, oh, she's probably never gonna hang out. But anyway, she did. And after everyone had gone through, she came up to me and she said, Reverend Larry, she said, I don't know if you remember me. She said, but 2.5 years ago, I came here on a Sunday with my child, my baby, and the baby was fussy. And one of the ushers came up to me and said, I'm sorry, but you're disturbing the service. You need to leave. And she said, I was really hurt, and I really needed to be here. And I said, oh yeah, I remember you, because the youth director had later told me this story, and we had actually resolved it. And she said, you called me a couple of days later when you found out about what had happened. And you encouraged me to come back again, and there would be a place for my child and a place where I could go and listen to the service. She said, so I came back, and she said, and I've been here every Sunday since then. But she said, what you don't know about me is at that time in my life, I was living in my car with my child. She said, my life had hit absolute rock bottom. She said, so I would keep coming every Sunday, and I kept listening to this message and these words of truth. And she said, little by little, I was letting it in. I was beginning to see myself differently. And I began to grow into this sense that, life doesn't have to be this way. And I began to find opportunity, and I was able to get a job, and I was able to find daycare, childcare for my child. And she said, so 2.5 years later, I want you to know that I have founded an organization to help homeless mothers. And she said, I just wanted to thank you. I said, well, you did all the work. So, there's dozens, and you could tell your own stories. So that's what we're going to do at our town hall meeting today. We're going to talk about the value of spiritual communities, those that we recognize and those that maybe are untapped, that we haven't quite realized yet what we can bring forth. Because I know for myself, even though I retired from ministry, I still believe in the power of a spiritual community. There's so much inspiration on the internet today. You don't have to come to a place like this in order to get inspiration. You can get that. But what you can't get on the internet, you can't get this face-to-face, heart-to-heart, soul-to-soul connection. You can't get in this energetic field where you can feel that the connection with another human being. I don't think AI is gonna give us that. There's something about being physically present with another human being. All of you yearning, all of us yearning for this recognition of this presence and this power, and wanting to bring it forth in our life that is amplified by us gathering together. That's not just that's my anecdotal evidence, and I'm sure there's something more scientific. But anyway, let's end with a meditation, and then we'll have a short bathroom break, or whatever it is, comfort break, I'm supposed to call it, because nobody goes to the bathroom, you know that. And then we'll come back and have our little meeting. So take a deep breath with me, if you will, and let it out. And once again. Feel the ground beneath your feet, the support of the chair. Allow yourself, if you haven't already, to just be fully present and comfortable here. Feeling each breath coming into your body as a reminder that life gives unto life. And just as you don't have to think about each breath, the presence and the power and the love of God are constantly infilling us and expressing through us. We take it for granted, but our lives are being lived by this that we call God, Spirit. Just as all of the functions of the body that are happening, millions of transactions and chemical reactions and electrical impulses, all without your control. It requires nothing of you. You simply get to be. there is a power, and this power animates us, illumines us, guides us, comforts us. And it asks nothing in return. Only that our hearts stay open, which is our most natural state. So just bring your attention to your heart space now. You might put your hand there if it helps. And breathe into that heart. And this is your home. This is where you live and have your being. This is the portal to all wisdom and love, right action, right guidance, all intuition. In the mind, there are endless questions, and in the heart, there are none. You know for sure. You know right now, without consulting your mind. There's a felt knowing. What has always been here? Have you not always known that you are? When you were 5 years old, 10 years old, 20, 30. That's always been there. It's never been diminished. It was never born. It cannot die. It is the I am that you are. It's shared with everyone and everything. And it's the source of all the peace and happiness we've been yearning for.